It was a cold evening, the kind that seemed to wrap the entire town in silence. James, a 35-year-old single dad, sat in a small diner just off the highway, waiting for his order while his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, was coloring on a napkin beside him. They had spent the entire day driving to visit James's mother, but heavy snow forced them to stop for the night. James wasn't just a man, raising a child alone. He was a man who had rebuilt his life after tragedy. His wife, Emily, had passed away 3 years ago in a car accident, and since then, James had dedicated every heartbeat to his daughter. His life revolved around work, homework, bedtime stories, and the quiet ache that never truly left. The diner smelled of coffee, pancakes, and something oddly comforting. The neon sign outside flickered, and the only sound was the clinking of plates from the kitchen. A young waitress walked up to their table, her hands trembling slightly as she carried their food. She was in her early 20s, wearing a faded uniform with a name tag that read, Sophie. Her smile was small but forced, and when her eyes met James's, something flickered there, fear. James noticed instantly. Years of being a father had sharpened his ability to read people. "You okay?" he asked gently as she placed the hot chocolate in front of Lily. Sophie blinked rapidly and nodded, but her shaking hands betrayed her. "I'm fine, just tired," she whispered, but her eyes darted to the window near the corner booth, and James followed her gaze. Outside, under the dim light of a flickering street lamp, a dark figure stood by a car, smoking a cigarette. The man wore a leather jacket and had an intimidating stance, his eyes scanning the diner through the glass. Sophie froze for a second when their eyes met. Then she whispered something that made James's heart race. "Please don't let him see me." James looked at her, puzzled. "Who is he?" he asked quietly, but Sophie just shook her head, tears welling up. "Please just don't look at him. Don't let him come in," she whispered again, voice trembling. Before James could say another word, the diner door opened and the little bell above it chimed. The cold wind rushed in, and the man from outside walked in with a heavy step. He looked around, scanning every corner of the diner. Sophie immediately turned her back and pretended to wipe a nearby table, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The man's voice was deep and rough. "You seen a girl here, about 5'3", blonde hair, maybe wearing a uniform?" The cashier shook his head nervously. James could feel the tension tighten in the air. Lily looked up at her dad, confused. "Daddy, what's going on?" she whispered. James smiled faintly, trying to calm her. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just eat your pancakes." But his eyes never left the man. The stranger's eyes swept over every booth, and when they reached James's table, he stopped. James felt his protective instincts kick in. He subtly leaned forward, blocking the view of the booth behind him where Sophie was now crouching, pretending to pick something up. "You got a problem?" the man growled, his tone full of suspicion. "No problem," James replied calmly. "Just trying to enjoy dinner with my daughter." There was a long, tense silence. Then the man smirked, spat his gum into a napkin, and walked out. The door shut behind him and the bell jingled again. Sophie remained hidden until the sound of the man's car engine faded away. When she finally stood up, her face was pale, her eyes red from holding back tears. James looked at her seriously. "You want to tell me what that was about?" She hesitated for a long moment, then finally whispered, "That man. He's my ex-boyfriend. I ran away from him last month. He used to hurt me." Her voice cracked as she spoke. "He took everything I had. Money, ID, even my phone. I've been hiding ever since." James felt a deep wave of sympathy and anger rise inside him. He'd seen what fear looked like before. He'd felt it the night he lost his wife. "You don't have to face him alone," he said softly. "You can call the police." Sophie shook her head quickly. "He's done this before. He knows how to talk his way out of everything. I just need to stay invisible." James wanted to argue, but one look at her trembling hands made him realize she had already been through enough. He left a generous tip, and before leaving he handed her a small piece of paper. "That's my number," he said. "If he comes back or if you ever need help, call me, anytime." She hesitated, then nodded, clutching the paper as if it were a lifeline. As James and Lily left the diner, snow began to fall heavier. In the car, Lily looked at her father and asked innocently, "Daddy, why was that lady so scared?" James sighed, starting the engine. "Sometimes people hurt others, sweetheart, and sometimes they just need someone to stand by them." Lily looked out the window thoughtfully. "You stood by her, didn't you?" James smiled faintly. "I hope so." As they drove away, the headlights cut through the storm. But James couldn't shake the image of Sophie's terrified eyes. Something told him the story wasn't over yet. The next morning, James couldn't stop thinking about the waitress. He and Lily were supposed to continue their drive, but something in his gut told him to check the diner again before leaving town. They drove back through the slushy streets, snow still falling softly. The diner was quieter than before, the morning rush not yet begun. When James walked in, he saw Sophie behind the counter, her eyes tired but grateful when she recognized him. "You came back," she said softly. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay," he replied. She smiled faintly. "I am, for now." Before they could talk more, the bell above the door jingled again, and James's blood ran cold. The same man from last night walked in. This time he wasn't alone. Another man followed him, both wearing dark coats. Sophie went pale instantly. The first man's eyes locked on her. "There you are," he snarled. The entire diner fell silent. James stood up instinctively, placing himself between Sophie and the men. "She said she doesn't want to talk to you," James said firmly. The man sneered. "This ain't your business, buddy. Step aside." Lily, sitting in the booth, gripped her teddy bear tightly. But James didn't move. "It is my business now," he said calmly. The men moved closer, but James's voice didn't waver. "You take one more step, and I'm calling the police," Sophie whispered. "He won't stop. He never stops." Her voice trembled, and tears streamed down her face. The man laughed cruelly. "You think the cops will help you? They never did before." His arrogance was chilling. But James wasn't just some passerby. He had once served in the military before his wife's accident. He wasn't afraid to protect those who needed it. He subtly motioned for the cashier to call 911. When the first man tried to grab Sophie's arm, James reacted instantly. He blocked the move, twisted the man's wrist, and pushed him back against the counter. The second man tried to intervene, but James turned, his voice sharp. "You don't want to do this." For a moment, everyone froze. Then the distant sound of police sirens broke through the tension. The men exchanged nervous glances, realizing they were out of time. They bolted for the door just as the cops arrived. The officers tackled them before they could escape. Sophie collapsed into a chair, shaking uncontrollably. James knelt beside her, speaking softly. "It's over now. You're safe." She covered her face, sobbing silently. "I thought I'd never get away from him," she whispered. "You just did," James said gently. Over the next hour, statements were taken and the men were arrested. Sophie learned that her ex had been wanted in another state for assault and stalking. He wasn't getting out anytime soon. When the police left, she turned to James and said, "I don't know how to thank you." He smiled, glancing at Lily. "Just promise me you'll stop running. You deserve to live without fear." Sophie nodded, her eyes full of tears. "I will." A week later, James and Lily were back home. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. School runs, bedtime stories, pancakes on Sundays. But one morning, as James opened the mail, he found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a small thank you note. "For the first time in years, I slept without fear. You saved my life. Sophie." Tucked inside was a photo of her, standing in front of a small cafe in another town, smiling free. James smiled softly, tucking the note away. Lily came running in, waving her backpack. "Daddy, can we go to that cafe one day?" she asked. James nodded, his heart warm. "Yes, sweetheart. Someday we will." He looked out the window, watching the morning sun break through the clouds. He had lost so much in life, but that day in the diner had reminded him of something powerful. Sometimes, being there for someone when they need it most can change both lives forever.